What up, TTK Potters? I'm your host, Sky Guasco. This is episode 193 of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Podcast. Today, we are continuing our series of breaking down the incoming rookies. This time, it's the running backs going into the NFL draft later on this week. Joined once again by my good friend, Jonathan Rifkind, and always Lukas. Jonathan, how you feeling today?
Fantastic. This morning, I got my Starbucks drink comped at the drive-thru because I think the Starbucks girl thought I was cute. And so we're riding high right now, Sky, let me tell you.
Hey, man, a win's a win. You know what I'm saying? During these quarantine days, it's the little things. So good for you, brother.
Taking it all in stride.
Great. Good to have you back. Lukas, what's up, bro?
Well, I didn't go to Starbucks this morning, but 2 days to the NFL draft, and I'm very excited.
My man, I'm digging it. Yo, we broke down the quarterbacks yesterday. Tomorrow will be receivers and then tight ends after that. Over the last couple of months, we've been doing 2 episodes a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, with our end of month interviews on Sundays. But for this, we're just breaking them all out. So there's a lot of content coming up for this week heading into the 2020 NFL draft, which of course is going to be quite unique this year, being a teledraft all the way around. We've had some jokes on off air of maybe some, malfunctions they may have and things like that with Zoom or however they're going to do it. But the reality is this is how it's going to be done this year. So we'll make the most of it. Let's jump right into these running backs. These are running backs that we believe will get drafted one way or another. And the top half of these guys will probably be redraft effective right away. We're expecting them to land on a team where they get opportunity with, if nothing else, the back half of the season in 2020. And the back half of these guys are more potentially dynasty and long-term options unless they fall into a better option or, of course, injuries and things happen ahead of them. So we've got a lot of names to cover. Let's jump right into it. Got to start at the top here. Pretty much every analyst has one of Jonathan Taylor and or DeAndre Swift, one or two. Jonathan, as our esteemed guest, we'll start with you. Feel free to pick one of these guys and let's roll with it, and we'll cover the next one next.
I think that Taylor, from where we sit right now, is the better running back from what we've seen. I think that Swift has a higher ceiling because of a few factors. So right now, look, if I'm an NFL GM and I'm looking at these two guys, I'm probably going to take Jonathan Taylor because he has the credibility to back up his game. He's explosive. He has the perfect match of speed and strength, I guess. He's a little bit bigger, but he's fast. Fumbling was kind of an issue. But what really bothers me, or what really scares me, is he had almost 1,000 carries over 3 years in college. That's a big workload. That's a lot of carries. And for somebody who's 22, 21, 22, 23, yeah, your body can handle it. But by the time you're 25, if you're getting another 300 carries in the NFL, 250 carries in the NFL, and you're going up against bigger bodied defensive linemen, and you're getting hit that much harder, how viable can you be over the course of your career? So that's my question surrounding Jonathan Taylor. The talent is there. We know what he can do, and we've seen it on a consistent basis, except for Oregon when he averaged under 4 yards a carry for the first time all season long in the Rose Bowl. We can talk about that another time. But that's another red flag, right? Like, Oregon's defensive line was probably a top 2 or top 3 defensive line that Wisconsin faced this season. And Jonathan Taylor had one of his worst games. He still had 98 yards, but on 21 carries and no touchdowns. So what we saw, it happened against Michigan State. This guy is great, but against bigger body defensive linemen who can take him down, in a full body tackle. You can't shoelace this guy. You have to take him down with a bear hug. And that's what NFL defensive tackles are. That's what NFL middle linebackers are. So for me, those are the big questions surrounding Jonathan Taylor. Swift is great. He's more explosive, I think. But again, as we sit, Taylor's my guy, even with all those questions surrounding his durability.
Lukas.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only concern, and it actually kind of is. There's been a lot of up and down fluctuation of where his draft stock might land. Like, some people think round 1. I don't think it's going to be round 1, but this can be kind of the late round 2, maybe even round 3 if teams don't go running back. So there's everyone knows he's good, his profile is good, but I think everyone can see this sort of I'm going to say Alvin Kamara-esque play to DeAndre Swift, kind of how that came up, but his just sort of versatility on that end. But yeah, his profile is insane. He ran a 4.39, which no one was expecting, and that just put everything through the roof. So he's definitely my RB1.
Now with Jonathan Taylor, the con, I guess, riff is that we've heard that too, but then people are kind of quick to say, yeah, but Christian McCaffrey had the same thing at Stanford with the heavy workload, and then the heaviest workload arguably in the NFL as well as of late. So it is possible, but I'm with you that it's risky. We see a lot of these guys get used up big time, especially Alabama running backs maybe who are in that pro style offense. They get used up in college and they look great. They have huge stats. They come into the pros, maybe have a good rookie and sophomore season potentially. But once they're hit, 26, 7, 8, they kind of fade quickly. Did you have
Can I
something
make
to
a
add there?
Yeah, can I make a point on the Christian McCaffrey comparison? The thing about McCaffrey,
Shoot.
though, like the biggest difference between these two is Christian McCaffrey is an elusive back, right? Like he is a hybrid running back you can throw out in the passing game. Jonathan Taylor is not that. He's not elusive. He is going to try and bulldoze you into the ground. To me, like they could have the same workload. Jonathan Taylor is getting hit a lot harder, much more often. And so for me, because of that, Christian McCaffrey's a freak. He's an anomaly. We know that. Jonathan Taylor, I don't know if he's going to be an anomaly. He can. But for me, I think too many people are quick to make that comparison without really thinking about the fact that they're two different kinds of running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas, anything else?
No, I agree. I think it's weird because like I was trying to like think back of like, I don't want to say a comp, but like a scenario like this, like to me, there hasn't been a running back that like Fournette maybe was like the closest sort of situation. We saw he went really high. So like it's tough to like put a gauge on where his, obviously we're at a redraft based podcast where redraft is going to be through the roof because the team's going to draft him to be a workhorse. He's going to give you one season of good production, but maybe like he'll fall off the map really quickly. Maybe like we saw Fournette did his year 2. So it's just very interesting to see where he will fall in terms of the rankings maybe.
You know what a decent comp is, and it's bad to bring this. It's not a great comp just because of the ACL tear, but Bryce Love is a great comp. Bryce Love out of Stanford, obviously he was the Heisman runner-up 2 years ago or 3 years ago, tore his ACL 2 years ago, fell in the draft because he basically, he played 1 game or 2 games his senior year, got back onto the field fully healthy, and he just hasn't really amounted to anything. I don't know if it's necessarily the ACL tear, but he sort of has that Jonathan Taylor complex. Heavy workload in college, in between the tackles kind of guy, A gap, try to bulldoze through you. And he just hasn't been able to find it in the NFL. And that's probably the comp I would use right now just for recency bias purposes. But I think you're right. I don't think we've seen anything at the level of what Jonathan Taylor is bringing to the NFL.
We talked last episode about quarterbacks and Jake Fromm, and I made a mention, and we kind of had the same sentiments that he's, obviously he's I don't know about elite, but he's a solid college quarterback. He'll find a job in the NFL. He might, if nothing else, he'll be a long-term backup probably with multiple capabilities as a pocket passer or whatever. What I mentioned there wasn't a spark with him. I never felt watching a lot of Georgia games on SEC Network and whatever on the CBS Game of the Week. A lot of Georgia football I watched on accident on the West Coast, and not often was Jake Fromm winning games for Georgia, although DeAndre Swift was carrying the workload on offense against SEC defenses, which obviously is impressive. When I think of Jonathan Taylor, I like both these guys. I'm more just letting you guys banter back and forth about it. But I look at, Wisconsin running backs kind of in the last handful of years. Of course, Monty Ball and Ron Dane, that Lukas is a Broncos fan, knows well, and then Melvin Gordon. And we've kind of had, hit or miss on those guys with big workloads there. So it'll be interesting to see where these guys fall. Lukas, you're kind of you're our dynasty guy. We're not talking rankings on this episode, but because you brought it up, I'm curious. Do you have a different thought on these guys? Make up whatever team you think best maybe for these guys to land on. If they get, say, at least early down workload, either one of these guys, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, for redraft, where are you more excited in redraft or dynasty for both of these guys?
Yeah, so I'll give like the worst possible landing spot is kind of how I do it right now. I'm pulling up my dynasty ranking. So I have Taylor at 9 right now, and I have DeAndre Swift at 12. Obviously.
So who are those teams wise?
You
rankings. Sorry.
Yeah, so like I think the worst spot for Taylor, because I think he's, like I said, he's going to get drafted to be a workhorse. No team's going to take him to be a backup or like a change of pace back. I think like the worst spot would be like the Colts, I think, because Marlon Mack's still there for a year. Obviously, there'd be an adjustment period. Marlon Mack's a free agent next year. So not that like he wouldn't get good carries, but like it wouldn't be to the 250 touches that he probably will get projected if he goes to like the Dolphins or the Steelers or something like that. Swift, I don't know if there is a worse landing spot because the way I view him is sort of a change of pace to start. I said Kamara, but that's a lazy comp, but it fits the way he plays. I think coming into the next level, he's going to be give him 10 plus carries a game and then let him be your third down back. Let him get 10 targets a game, and that's where he's most efficient. So I think like for him, it'd be falling on a team to start that maybe utilizes a running back, sort of like in the third down, maybe. I don't know, like Leonard Fournette, maybe. I don't think he's ultimately going to go to the Jags, but a running back that they do use on third down, that would maybe limit his ceiling a little bit. But I think, I don't know, because I see both sides. If you're doing like a PPR league, like Swift could easily be much higher. But I just feel like Jonathan Taylor is going to get run to the ground for any team he goes for. Yes, the 1,000 carries is a concern. I don't know how it's going to translate. We haven't seen anything really like that. So it's going to be an interesting sort of, like breakdown come for redraft and dynasty.
If he does go somewhat early, and I don't expect him in the first half of the draft per se, but maybe the back half of the first round or even the early second round, we've seen a couple rookie running backs lately come out and get worked right away. Nick Chubb for sure, Sony Michel even, and Josh Jacobs last year. So there's definitely opportunity there. So I'm with you. All right. We've broken those guys down quite a bit, and they're really the hot topic at the running back level for everyone to discuss. So let's move on here. Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, Zach Moss, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, kind of that next tier. Let's kick it off with Cam Akers.
So I have him as my number 2 running back, and I don't know if that's a reach. He played he played behind the 118th ranked offensive lineman in FBS last year, or offensive line. It was bad. Graham Barfield he does yardscreated.com, basically charts out every single run for, I don't know how deep he goes with how many running backs, but he calculates their yards created. He hasn't released that yet, so that'll be an interesting site to view. I don't know when he usually does it. I think it's post-draft, but I think Cam Akers will top the chart. He created every single yard for himself. The O-line was not good, and you saw it on film. He had uses of elusiveness at the line to say find a hole, but there was no hole, or he just had to do a lot himself. So I think if a team buys into him, which is going to be the problem, because he's going to go at best late round 2 if running backs are falling, but he's not going to go ahead of JT, ahead of Swift, probably not Dobbins, probably not even Clyde Edwards-Helaire at this point, because teams really like his pass catching ability. But if he lands on a good spot, I think the best spot for him would be like the Falcons, some team that needs a running back, but not necessarily needs a running back, like the Steelers, maybe the Jags. We do mention them because Fournette is a free agent next year, or they're their 5th round option, which I don't think they're going to give him. But to me, he can be the third down back for a year and then work into that full-time starter, like we saw Kamara. Even kind of your boy James White sort of worked into that offense. He kind of now carries the ball a little bit more. So I think he just has a higher ceiling, and he showed more to me behind a worse O-line.
Briff?
I don't have much more to add. I thought that was a pretty good overall analysis. He's my second favorite back in the draft also, by the way. I think that I will say this. There was only one real thing that I thought was funny when I actually was doing research on him, and that was the CBS analysis of him. They have under weaknesses, it says can get overly creative instead of just hitting the hole. The problem is that his offensive line was so freaking bad last year. It was so freaking bad that, number one, this dude didn't have the opportunity to hit the hole, but he probably didn't have the confidence in his guard to hold the hole open long enough for him to be able to hit it. So he probably just decided to try and take another route. It doesn't always work, but sometimes in a system like that, you have to do that. So I think that was just one of the dumbest critiques I've seen on this guy's game, just because, like, situationally, he didn't have much of a choice. But everything else you said, Luke, I agree with. I think that he's just so – I don't know. I think that he's the guy that you want in the NFL on your team from the start. I think the Lions would be a great landing spot for him. I think, like you said, I think that he could be what they wanted Kerryon Johnson to be for them. That's how I see him. But yeah, I love Cam Akers.
So let's talk about that getting too creative. I think that's kind of maybe a silly term, whatever, but I immediately think of Le'Veon Bell. All right. With the Steelers, the Steelers have a top offensive line for the last 40 years in the NFL, right? So they've been dominant with Jerome Bettis type running backs and Le'Veon Bell, obviously. Le'Veon Bell goes to the Jets. My critique last year, preseason, was I'm not worried about Le'Veon Bell as a player. He sat out a year, and that was a whole thing. But as a player and his style, I was worried about it with the Jets. The Jets are fucking horrendous. So I was worried that he was going to dance around, try to get too creative for a step or two. By the time he does that, defensive lines are able to contract on a bad offensive line and swallow him up. Sure enough, Le'Veon Bell was horrendous last year behind the line of scrimmage. Somebody like Cam Akers, if he doesn't land on a dominant offensive line type scheme, are you guys worried about him falling into the same thing? Because in college, the separation of a great running back, vision, all these other things, you're able to obviously, make up for it in talent alone sometimes, which it sounds like he clearly did with a horrendous offensive line in the ACC. But in the pros, you're not going to come across that very often. And so I think some of those guys get too fancy at the professional level and end up kind of hurting themselves. Either of you guys have a concern there?
I mean, it'd be more so like, say he goes to the Jets. Like, say that's probably the worst O-line in the league. I don't know like the exact rankings. I think that'd be something where even the worst offensive line in the NFL is going to be so much better than Florida State's offensive lines. Like, I don't know. Like, I see where that could be a problem. Yeah.
But I would contract though that the defenses are so much better than anybody 100%. That he's ever seen. So unfortunately, that I think that conversation's two-way street.
But I think because of that was what I also first thought of, Lucas, when you made your point. But I think that the reason that does sort of hold up a little bit is that you're getting more room to grow in the NFL because you are playing behind more experienced guys. Like you could be the worst defensive line or the worst offensive line playing against the best defensive line in the NFL, and you're still going to have more opportunity than you are as a terrible offensive line against a great defensive line in the NCAA, I think. Just because you're in the NFL, like these guys have talent. They got there for a reason. So I agree. Like I don't think that that necessarily the argument is like, oh, he's in the NFL, so he's going to be with better players. It's like we see like, oh, the best argument is like, oh, like this quarterback had wide receiver talent or NFL caliber wide receivers on his NCAA team, and then it doesn't translate to the NFL, right? Or vice versa. So I think that, I'm not too worried about him being too creative because I also think that coaches are way more affirmative in the NFL than they are in the NCAA. I think that when you have, especially in Willie Taggart, like Florida State had just a god awful season, just from a management standpoint, from a playing standpoint. I mean, they were a top 25 team coming into the season, and I think they almost lost to an FCS team their first week. Like they almost lost to North Florida or something. Anyways, yeah, I mean, like it just wasn't the right system. And he'll have a better coach, and I think that he'll be okay.
So I believe you both mentioned that Cam Akers was your second running back in this class. Who's first and who's third?
JT, Akers, Swift. And I guess the only reason I have Swift at 3 is I think that I'm not saying he's bad by any means, but like when you think of Georgia, you think of every single running back comes out of the NFL, gets drafted, gets a chance. Swift is just like, I think he's very, like, I don't want to say a system running back. There's just a part of me that's like, okay, what's to say he's not like a Sonny Michel, Todd Gurley. Obviously, Todd Gurley had his like 2,000-yard season, but like nothing like stood out to me when I watched Swift that like Akers couldn't do as well. That could easily change because if Swift goes round 1, I feel like I can't keep him at 3. I think he would have to be the 101 or the running back 1. I don't know. It's just like it's a tough spot because I really like Akers. I really think that he has a higher ceiling just because Swift might be a change of pace back at best, a limited carry back at like his ceiling.
Riff?
Yeah, I actually have it's literally JT 1, Akers 2, Swift 3. I don't know. I really like J.K. Dobbins.
Well, let's get into it. Why don't you take it away right now?
Sure. I think J.K. Dobbins coming into this season, the hype was real. Like, I don't think that he's a hype beast. I don't think the Ohio State complex was what perpetuated the perception surrounding him coming into the season, but there was a notable drop off. This guy still ran 2,000 yards in the NFL, or excuse me, in the NCAA this season. Still 21 touchdowns. Yes, I touched on it before with Jonathan Taylor. The Big Ten defensive line wise, not the best conference, especially when you look at the strength of Ohio State and the defensive line specific analytics against the teams that they played. Not phenomenal, which is why I don't think that he gets the credibility he deserves at this point now, as opposed to when we came into the season. Not great vision, runs with his head down. There are opportunities where he can cut and run upfield, and he'll just run right into the guy that is trying to tackle him, which also leads to the fact that he's not super elusive, which is a problem to an extent in the NFL. But again, like we see it all the time with running backs, big body running backs. Josh Jacobs is a great example where he doesn't have to be elusive to be successful as long as he hits the gaps the right way. And so for J.K. Dobbins, I think he needs to grow a little bit more. I think he's still a little bit raw. But, he's been receptive in his college career in the 3 years he played at Ohio State, or the 2 years technically. And he's a good freaking running back. So I don't have much more than that.
Yeah, he's more NFL ready than Akers and Swift by a long shot. I think he just does everything like a B, good enough to where he can be an NFL running back. He probably won't fall to day 2. I wouldn't think. He will get a chance to split, if not start. I think the number 1 spot everyone's putting him at is the Rams now. They have 2 second-round picks, and it'd be a good fit, I think. It's what the Rams need. They need a running back that's not going to be – I think Todd Gurley is a personality more than he is a player. I don't think Dobbins is going to be that. I think he – sort of takes it with what it is. He knows he's good, but he doesn't flash it. Maybe where, I don't know if Swift does by any means, but I feel like Swift might be that guy that would kind of come out and do that. The only downfall with Dobbins is he weighed in at 209 at the combine. That's not it's oh my gosh, 209, that's not good, but he's not at the high BMI like the other guys are. Maybe that might play into how well he can take hits in the NFL. I'm not going to break that down because I don't really know exactly how that translates very well, but he also didn't run at the combine, so we don't have 40 time. On tape, he's fast enough. We saw it against Clemson. He had a really good game that game. So yeah, I think he's going to stay right around that 4 for me, maybe go up to 3 because his ceiling is definitely lower unless he goes for 10 plus touchdowns behind a good offensive line. But I think he's got to be close to NFL ready as JT is. They're both just very like I said, B average overall running backs, but I think they're going to have long NFL careers.
Obviously, these guys are in peak condition, especially skill players at the college level, but even in the NFL, whoever drafts him knows what they're getting right now, but it's also a long game. You think about guys who have come in at a certain body weight. Obviously, you can't change height on players, but you can change weight up or down, fluctuating. So, if his body's able to handle it, he could put on 10 pounds, I'm sure, and get into that 220 range if they want him to. Again, he might just be an elusive back. We see a lot of college running backs come in who are the dominant 3-down back on their team, somebody that plays at Ohio State. I mean, just beast in long runs constantly, destroying everybody. They come into the NFL, and again, everything starts to even out very quickly, and they become a 3rd down back instead and things like that. So I'm not saying J.K. Dobbins, that's his role necessarily moving forward, but if he's on that smaller tier, they're going to use him however best effective at the NFL level there. Riff, let's kick it back to you as our Pac-12 guy. Why don't you kick it off with Zach Moss from Utah?
Yeah, Zach Moss, interesting. 5'9", 223. He's a little bit hefty boy, right?
Thick.
Thick. Double C thick, though, not with the K.
Sure.
Look, this guy is interesting. I tried to figure him out also. Utah was one of the most fascinating teams in college football because of their defense, but because of their backfield also. Their defense didn't give up more than 300 yards until they played Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. That was the team's identity. And then Zach Moss utilized the ability offensive or lack of offense, I guess, with Tyler Huntley to his advantage. What I saw from him was his ability to make defenders miss. And I think that is a skill we rarely see from big-bodied backs in the NFL. I think most guys are yard-after-contact guys. Zach Moss was a yard-after-contact guy, but in the Pac-12, linebackers are a lot smaller. If he was in the SEC, I don't think he would have been able to break away out of tackles the way that he did, or from initial contact the way he did in the Pac-12. But I think that creates a sense of confidence and also a familiarity that he's going to be able to bring with him to the NFL. His acceleration is meh. Whenever he gets to the second level, he can get caught, especially from very quick defensive backs. I don't know how much he's going to be able to get to the second level initially in the NFL. I think there's going to be a big learning curve with him because NFL defenses are very different than Pac-12 defense. I think the Pac-12 defensively is the furthest thing you can get away from in a Power 5 conference from the NFL, which is why like guys like Royce Freeman, phenomenal running back. Why is he not thriving in the NFL? Different schematics defensively. An offensive line, whatever. We can get into that. Also, shout out to your Broncos for ruining Royce Freeman, Lukas.
We've gone in depth already on that.
We're already past this. All right.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I love Zach Moss. He was really fun to watch, the last 2 years. By the way, shout out for 300 plus carries 2 straight years, over 2,000 yards 2 straight years. This guy was a workhorse. Again, I think he's going to be your third down back to start in the NFL because, again, yards after contact was dominant in the NCAA. His ability to make defenders miss might be like, you're 3rd and 5. You don't want to throw the ball. You want to try to get the defense off guard. You run a little draw with him, and maybe you get 6 yards out of it. So that's what I see out of Zach Moss. I think he's going to be probably, mid 4th or 5th round pick. I think he's going to drop below some of these guys. I think he's going to drop below Anthony McFarland from Maryland. I even think Eno Benjamin could get drafted above him. Because he's more explosive, and we love explosivity, especially from like a fan standpoint. But Zach Moss will go, and he'll be productive. How productive is the question? I don't know.
It's kind of funny. So I pulled up my write-up for Zach Moss, and I'm just going to read off the strengths and the weaknesses, and it basically checked off everything you said. So strengths, the number 1 was ability to create. He will probably be number 2 on yardscreated.com whenever that launches. Dependability, and then patience and size. He weighed in at 223 pounds. The weakness is the combine. So relating these two in here, he was hyped up. A lot of PFF, they like all had him as their RB1, and then he ran a 4.65. I'm not gonna break down if it's his true speed because when you watch the film, he's not very elusive or doesn't have very good burst, but he's not slow by any means. So it's definitely a sort of question mark. Take combine numbers for what you will, but yeah, he's like a step down from J.K. Dobbins. Is kind of the way I think about him, and maybe his NFL readiness, but I think he will have a long career too, just because teams can continue to sign him. It's kind of like why Mark Ingram continues to have a good career. Mark Ingram's not extreme burst, he's not flashy, but he's just consistent. They know they can run him into the ground, but like he's still standing, he's still producing good numbers, so they can definitely use him to complement with a third down guy or just a flashy guy. Like you said, Royce Freeman, if they would use Royce Freeman like the Saints or now the Ravens use Mark Ingram, and then use Lindsey like they use Alvin Kamara, like it would definitely work that way. It just obviously didn't turn out like that. So I think Moss will definitely have a good NFL career. But yeah, I think just because he ran slow, I think he'll drop down to that 4th round, maybe even 5th round range now.
I like that a lot, and obviously we've gotten into Royce Freeman and Philip Lindsay, obviously Melvin Gordon there now too, which is a whole nother layer of things. Jonathan, really quick, totally off subject, but while we brought up Royce Freeman, I don't even know if it's a bold prediction. It was just a thought that one of those guys has to go. They have 3 very productive running backs. They bring in Melvin Gordon. Obviously, he's the 80% guy, and then those other 2 are either going to split work, which seems silly, or they're going to keep Freeman or Lindsey as the second option, and I think the other one has to go. In your opinion, do you think the Broncos let go of one of those guys, and if so, who is it?
Yes, the Broncos let go of one of those guys, and I think you and I both know who it's going to be, and it's very sad, and both of us are probably in denial about it.
I think he'll get a better opportunity somewhere else, though. Frankly,
no. Look, everything's meant to happen for a reason. Royce is an NFL running back. Royce isn't like we know. We've seen spurts of it, but I love Philip. Philip Lindsay's fun.
Me too.
Lindsay's, he's the hometown hero.
Great story, UDFA first one ever to get 1,000 yards back-to-back years or whatever.
Yeah, Royce is gone. Where does he go? I hope he doesn't go to the Jets. That would ruin his NFL career. But that's totally a move that would happen. Like the Jets be like, okay, like a power back, like offset Le'Veon Bell, maybe switch it up a little bit with Darnold, and then that's it. Sorry,
Gross.
Royce Freeman. It was a great career. It's like Jordan Bell going to the Golden State Warriors, never playing, and then just like that's just what it is. It's just Oregon professionals.
Rough. All right, let's move on then. We're going to get into Clyde Edwards-Helaire, CEH out of LSU. Lukas, why don't you kick this off here, and then we'll dive into some back end guys.
Yeah. So when you think of him, you definitely think of James White. Like that is the
White.
That is the ultimate comp for this guy. This is what he's going to be in the NFL. He can run the ball. He had 6.6 yards per carry at LSU. I'm not going to break down if he's good or LSU is good, because if that was the case, then we'd be having the same conversation with Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson, which we're not. So he's definitely a good football player. He will be good in the NFL. He had 55 catches on 58 targets last year. And, I mean, just watch any film on him. He will get the ball behind the line of scrimmage, and then somehow he'll get 6 yards downfield for a screen play or whatever type of throw you want to give to him. He's just very like James White. I keep going back to him because James White you would not think would be a good NFL player, but then you give him the ball at the line of scrimmage, and then he gets you a first down when 3rd and 8 or whatever the case may be on that. So I think he's definitely set to – it's just tough because he's going to be extremely landing spot dependent. A lot of Bucs fans really want him with Tom Brady for exact James White reasons. So we'll see how that goes. But I think kind of he could easily be the first running back off the board come NFL draft time. A team might just want a 3rd down back. They might just want their change of pace. A team like the Chiefs, the people have him mocked there. They just need that guy too, Damian Williams. I think like the Colts pick up early, the Dolphins could easily go get him in their first pick if they really like him. So I think he'll definitely have a higher draft capital than I think people realize. And obviously draft capital leads to opportunities. Opportunities lead to productions. I think he's definitely in for a good career.
Riff?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it. I like him. I don't think that he's as like I think that fans see these players differently than analysts do, or even like you people who look at the perspective of like the team. And like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is he's probably one of the more fun guys in the draft. Like he's a really fun running back. Like if you did not look at any of the professional critiques or the expert critiques, and you just watch this guy from the season, you would think like this guy would be the number 1 pick in the draft because he's so he's just so freaking fun to watch. And I think that plays a part in his draftability because he is a guy who's going to be productive, like Lukas said. He plays much bigger than his size, which I love. Like this guy, he thinks that he's like 6'1", he's 5'7" and 207. Yeah. He just like he doesn't care if you're 6'1", 350 pounds. He'll try to run you over, and I love that. He has a lot of confidence, more confidence than I think anybody. Maybe J.K. Dobbins. That dude is beaming with confidence. But I mean, like he's reliable, and like you said, he's a good receiver out of the backfield. I think the Colts would be a perfect place for him. Put him in the backfield. Marlon Mack is there. Marlon Mack is obviously the primary, but you have now a passing down back, which is important, especially now you Phillip Rivers, who isn't very mobile, and you can get sort of the bailout guy down the flat. Hines is cool. I think that the ceiling is much higher for Edwards-Helaire, which is why I think he should go to the Colts. Probably a late third round pick is my guess, early 4th round pick. But yeah, no matter where he goes, he's going to be productive.
Really quick on the James White comp. Riff, if you don't know, we're huge fans of James White here on the podcast, have been for a couple of years. For a number of reasons. Our previous my co-host to start this podcast a couple of years ago has been drafting James White in the 8th round of PPR leagues for like 10 years, and he's always gotten huge value, especially a couple of years ago when he was like RB7 overall, whatever. Anyway, just to comp really quick, James White is a little bigger, 5'10", 205, but I want to just break down his efficiency. Obviously, now this is kind of strictly that like CEH going to Tampa Bay with Tom Brady and doing the James White all over again. So basically, like Tom Brady, I'm not going to get into this whole downfield thing. That's a whole other conversation. The reality is, as long as he has OJ Howard, which he may be off the team by the time this podcast airs, but he does have Mike Evans, he does have Chris Godwin, he does have field stretchers. So James White in that situation would be able to run out of the backfield. And Tom Brady's frankly going to need a consistent running game, but he's also going to need a dump off because he's not going to take hits. That's how he's been able to play for 20 years is he doesn't take those hits. He's going to have those dump offs, and if CEH is going to be that guy, it's going to be great. James White does have a 4.1 average yards per carry, 8 rushing touchdowns. He is able to get it done between the tackles occasionally, and then almost 9 yards per catch out of the backfield, which is obviously incredible. In an offense like that, where they're spreading everything out and high powered, that would be a great option for an electric third down back. So I think it's a great comp and with James White, first of all, and with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, who needs a running back. Even if Rojo ends up producing in his third year, I just don't think he's going to be that guy per se, but that could be fun now that obviously Peyton Barber's gone too. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him coming out of LSU. But again, we talked quite a bit about Joe Burrow and, of course, everybody else on LSU, and we're going to get into the receivers tomorrow. Everybody has this kind of like elevated maybe stature because of LSU and the national champions, and they dominated everybody. But they also have almost like a cloud as well of like everybody was really fucking good. So was anybody actually that good kind of a conversation that you hear with a lot of those teams. And I'm not saying that none of them weren't that good, but a lot of times you get that like everybody was so good who was actually as good as they seemed to be. So he'll be an interesting one for sure.
Can I just say something? Please. Sorry, really quickly on that mindset. I hate that mindset for college sports because there are 130 teams, right? Like there are group of, by the way, this is a whole separate conversation. I think that the road that we're headed with the whole coronavirus thing, we're going to see a split of the Power Five and the Group of Five in some fashion. We can get into that in another podcast. But I hate that mindset because the sample size is so big, and there are 130 FBS schools. There are 330 Division I institutions. In college basketball is the worst. And it's like, well, if everybody in the SEC is good, is everybody really that good? Yes, everybody's really that good. If everybody's really good in one conference, that conference is really good. The SEC is beating up on everybody else because they're that good, right? Michigan, everybody's like, oh, well, Big Ten is like shitty, like Michigan is shitty. So that, like, no, they're just really bad. Like, if you're bad, you're bad. If you're good, you're good. If you have good players, you're a good team. It's not that hard. People try to sensationalize everything, and it just doesn't work. Sorry, that's my rant on that.
No, I totally agree with you, man. And of course, Oregon with the Mariota days, especially here.
We're the worst. Oregon fans are the worst. We do it more than anybody. It's awful.
I was just going to say, man, it was like, we were constantly in that kind of top 5 conversation as the playoffs started and all that. And this year we had a nice taste with Herbert or whatever, but we have been down a couple years. But the biggest thing was like, look, Oregon should be in the same conversation as LSU and Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and all this shit. It's like, okay, cool. We play LSU a bunch of years ago, get waxed. Play Auburn, should have beat them, but we lost. We play in the championship against Ohio State, come up short. It's like, right. I'm a Duck fan through and through, but you got to put your money where your mouth is when you're talking big game like that. And the Ducks aren't the only one. It's just who we're passionate about. But
the Ohio State game this year coming up, if that's played, will be the only opportunity for Duck fans to actually be able to sit on the pedestal that they've built for themselves for so long if they win. That'll be the biggest win in program history, in our recency bias in program, at least in modern program history.
It's a big one, man. North Dakota State, I think, is one that nobody's paying attention to either. And I really think like those dudes are legit. They win the championship in their own right every single year for the last decade, whatever. So, all right, let's move on here. Kind of definitely not sleepers by any means, but just kind of maybe a third tier, if you will. Lukas will kick it off here with Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, he's like the extreme discounted J.K. Dobbins when I watch, and he's like 23 years old, so he's gonna be like 24 when the season starts. Obviously, we talked about like the running back, maybe roller coaster shelf life. The peak is like 25, so like there's not much. Like if he goes to the Chiefs, like maybe round 5 or round 4, they're just gonna run him into the ground for 1 or 2 years and then be done with him. I think that's just kind of his career trajectory. Vanderbilt was awful. He was a transfer from Illinois, I remember. If you want to watch highlights, just search the LSU game. He's got all of his big plays towards the end of the game. We always talk about how we don't say garbage time, but that was like true garbage time. That was like LSU's like 4-string defenders in there. So like go watch that, I guess, if you want to see maybe his NFL skills. I don't know. He's not nothing too special with burst, elusiveness, speed. But he will get it done if you ask him to in the NFL. So he'll probably be like a late fourth round pick as like a backup running back at best.
Could he be like a Carlos Hyde for a while though?
Yeah, like if you that'd be like if you gave him 180 carries, he could probably turn that into 1,000 yards like Carlos Hyde
Because,
did.
there's a lot of not a lot. There's a handful of running backs like that in the NFL who aren't sexy. They're not super fun for fantasy per se because they're not going to win you a week. But Jordan Howard, Carlos Hyde, some of these guys, they're productive when they get the work. They're going to score a touchdown every other week. They're going to get you 80, 90 yards. They don't really catch the ball, which is a big one in fantasy, mostly, obviously in PPR leagues. But I just think of guys who have a place on an NFL roster for maybe a long time. Jordan Howard is like, I forget about him every single year, and then randomly he's just back on another team. Carlos Hyde is the same thing. So these guys stay relevant in the NFL. They're just not as sexy for fantasy football. So that'd be interesting. Riff, anything to add on Vandy? Or Keyshawn Vaughn, I should say.
Yeah, I have a lot to add on Vandy. No, Keyshawn Vaughn buy very, 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 very low. Just buy very low. Buy low, hope you can sell high. What's funny is I have a bunch of friends who think that they know that like how this stuff works, or like you guys. It's so refreshing to sit down and do a podcast with you guys like this because you guys know your shit. And I hang out with a lot of people. I hang out with people in sports. I mean, he works in baseball or hockey, but like they all think like, oh, like this person is. So I have a friend who's like, oh, Vaughn is the sleeper. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, like. He had a game where he was 14 for 139 and had a 10-yard per average carry and 2 touchdowns. And I look at him, it's against Eastern Tennessee. And it's like, bro, like, you're going to – exactly. Like, well, actually, Eastern Tennessee had a decent FCS season. But, like, the point is like, you have to add context into your takes. You can't just be like, I'm going to be the hot take man, throw some bullshit out, and then hope that people are dumb enough to latch onto it, right? And I think that a lot of people – and Vaughn's that guy. Like he's the guy that people are gonna be like, oh, nobody knows who this guy is. He had some great games. He had some really bad games, which are the games that mattered. But he had some really good games. So why not? No, it doesn't work like that for me. Buy very low. Hope that he can be productive. And if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, I think that the 2 years they run him to the ground and he's done take that Lukas had is perfect. Like that's probably how his career is gonna go.
Fair enough. Let's move on. We got a couple names left here, and then we'll get into let you guys turn you loose a little bit on some sleepers. This next one's interesting. So Antonio Gibson out of Memphis. Essentially, Lukas, maybe I'll have you break this down a little bit more. But essentially, he primarily played receiver, running back hybrid in college. He'll most likely get drafted as a running back in the NFL. That's why he's in this segment. However, I do have a note here that he's kind of that wide receiver. I'll let you make the comp of Ty Montgomery here in a second, but I think that's a perfect like who's who here when these guys get drafted as a running back, but have the wide receiver skill set. So for the average fantasy player who see somebody get drafted as a running back may not have the full insight on that. Also, it's not really a thing anymore in fantasy football, but I remember the good old days where you'd have somebody, I think CJ Spiller was one of them that I used to capitalize for years, where in fantasy, he had like a running back / receiver position line, and now we have a bunch of flexes and it's kind of obsolete. But before that, you had like you could play CJ Spiller as a running back or a receiver, and that opened up a spot on your team. So maybe like somebody like an Antonio Gibson is kind of that guy. But Lukas, take it from here.
Yeah, so Memphis is where you went to school. It's like the second on the rankings of running back just to a lesser extent. They have Tony Pollard last year, Darrell Henderson last year. Both got drafted pretty high with high hopes. Now you have Antonio Gibson, Patrick Taylor. He's kind of a lower guy. He'll still get drafted though, just because they all are good playmakers. The problem with being just a playmaker is the rate of hitting and non-hitting is very there's not like think of Cordell Patterson to Deebo Samuel. Like they're not the same player, but like they're not used as like a running back or a receiver. They're just used as like a utility. So you can kind of see like the ceiling and the floor. I think it was like 10. They didn't like ask every NFL team, but only one NFL team out of the sample size they asked viewed him as a receiver. I think it was like 19 to 20 said running back, so he'll probably be drafted as a running back. I mean, that could change. He could play quarterback for all we know. come the start of the season. So I think he'll just be a utility player. He will be extremely landing spot dependent, just like, I mean, because obviously some offenses don't run like the others. So he'll need to fit into an offense where they're going to manufacture touches, make sure he gets the ball 5 times a game, whatever it may be. Just to break down his stats last year, he had 71 touches last year, and he put up over 1,100 yards with 12 touchdowns. Like, that's just to show how he can work. That also could take into account that Memphis was a really good offense. They played, I can't even think of their conference name now. Not a good conference with like SMU. Like, the games were like 50 to 65.
SMU was a ranked team for a couple of seasons or a couple of weeks this year. So was UCF. They played in the best group of. I would argue. No, I can't make that argument. But they were probably the best group of 5 conference this season.
Yeah, they're just fun to watch. Like, it's always like that. Like the Memphis SMU games, like 60 to 61. Like the over/under total set at like 82, and you're like, why would I bet the over? And then it always hits in like the first half or something stupid. So it's always like just big shootouts. So I mean, basically with him is if he goes like round 3, or he could even go round 2 if a team really likes him, he's gonna get a lot of touches, and he'll be dynasty. He'll be a first round pick. Redraft, he'll probably get taken pretty high just because. Like, I mean, we always go back to James White, but there's a reason why the 3rd string running back for the Patriots gets taken in the 8th round in redraft, just because they manufacture touches for him. So, like, that will be there if he gets drafted high, but his floor is bad. Like, Cordell Patterson is ultimately his floor just because players like that maybe don't work out in certain offenses.
Anything else to add, Riff?
No, I think that, yeah, I agree with everything. I don't think he's going to go that high, though. I think he's going to go in the 4th round. And I think that Pittsburgh would be a great landing spot for him just because you have the dynamic with Connor. They could go pick another running back too, like a more power running back, and we could just see how they decide to manage that dynamic. But I would like to, I don't like Pittsburgh. I'm not like an NFL team fan, but I just don't like Pittsburgh. I like the city. I don't like the team. But I would like to see him on Pittsburgh.
Fair enough. Let's jump in a couple more here. Anthony McFarland of Maryland. Lucas, we'll let you take it away here as well.
Yeah, this is my guy right here. I think at running back 5, I believe.
Ooh.
Over here. He's good. That's why I have him that high. He is a very. I'm not even gonna break down the stats because like you'll just like turn off the podcast. Running back 6 actually. But go back and watch the Ohio State game in 2018. You'll know why I like him a lot. He's a very this film guy. You give him the ball and he's going to the end zone until he gets completely brought down by like 5 defensemen. Like, he is just to go get it. Well, to start, he's Booger McFarland's kid too. We didn't preface that before. So like, sure, Booger McFarland's kid, how high of a potential can he have? But he is going to be probably a 4th round pick. He will not be drafted to be a workhorse, not a chance. Maryland was really bad last year, but for some reason they almost had College game day week 3. Then it came to Iowa State, so we actually got lucky on that one. They just got swamped by Syracuse in week 3, and then it was all downhill from there. But he's just good. There's not like he just gets the ball and you know that you're getting a productive play out of him. You're not getting a Le'Veon Bell wait behind the line for a 10-foot wide hole, or else you're getting -2 yards. You just get that, like, it's like Matt Breida. I think you get the ball to Matt Breida. There's a reason that he gets 10 yards a carry, just because he's going until he gets just 3 guys on top of him. That's probably why he gets injured every time he touches the ball. But I think McFarland will be. I just really like him. I keep like projecting him to the Chiefs in like round 3 or 4. That would be so awesome because I think Damian Williams and McFarland would just be. You can't even stop the Chiefs offense anyways. But if you added him to it, it'd be even better.
I think, Damian Williams, I don't think is a terrible back, but he's not an every down back. And we saw, again, Carlos Hyde was effective. Shady's shady at this point. But if they had a bigger body there to take off some of that workload, I think it would be helpful. Riff, anything to add on Booger Jr.?
Just injuries. He broke his leg in high school. He had some other problems at Maryland. He's fun. I don't know. I don't think I'm as high on him as Luke. I know I'm not as high on him as Lucas is. I think he's like a 6th or 7th round guy, to be completely honest. That nothing taken away from him. I just, he is elite straight line speed, but he's not agile in any way. Like you said, Lucas, like it's going to take 4 guys to take him down. Like he was just going to keep going until either he hits the end zone or you literally take the bulldozer and punish him. But I just don't think that translates to the NFL like it does in college. And that's my biggest worry with him is like when we make NFL teams are way better than college. This is where that argument makes more sense because you're playing in a conference. You know, the reason that College Game Day wanted to go to Maryland was because this team put up like 150 points in its first 2 games of the season.
Yeah.
And then they had the complete drop off. They were just, again, viewership means everything. So if this team is fun to watch offensively and they can sell ad spots, they're going to try and put them on. They were smart not to do it because that's when, like you said, they got slapped by Syracuse. I just don't think that – I think he fit the system for what it was. I don't know if it'll translate to the NFL, so I'm not very high on him.
Let's talk about another one, another big body run till he gets completely taken down. A.J. Dillon from BC. The obvious comps coming out right now, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, for you throwback fantasy players out there, who was awesome for the Giants for a couple of years. Kind of that first Thunder and Lightning with Tiki Barber back in the day. They were a lot of fun. A.J. Dillon, I personally like him. I kind of like the rumbling, bumbling, stumbling guys when they're able to do it. One of my favorite football players of all time is Mike Allstott. So when these players are effective, I love them. I'd rather watch somebody like an Earl Campbell or Mike Allstott or Derrick Henry running people over than that shifty juke any day. But A.J. Dillon, I think it's obviously the template is set with some of these other big backs, but we've seen a lot of these guys unfortunately fade out, like a Peyton Hillis and some others as well.
It's just like his film is so bad. Like he just gets the ball and then he just like puts his shoulder down and go. Like he had like close to the same amount of carries as Jonathan Taylor, close-ish in terms of production. Like obviously his second season was not the greatest, but he had 1,600 yards in the other 2 seasons, his freshman and junior year. He caught the ball a couple times, obviously, but he's not going to catch the ball in the NFL. He's 6 foot, 247 pounds, and he ran a 4.53. That's the 97th percentile speed score. The good thing with him is he's going to be drafted, and they're going to use him. Like no one's going to draft him just to have him sit on the sideline or be a change of pace back, because he's not a change of pace back. But he will get drafted. He's probably like the ultimate like bridge running back. That's kind of how I think about it. Like you know what you're going to get with him. There's not like a hidden trait he possesses or anything that like he'll unlock coming in the NFL. He's just going to get the ball, put his shoulder down and run. Like LeGarrette Blount, we saw what he did. He had like 18 touchdowns one year, I think close to that, something like that. He could ultimately do that. This be the ultimate goal line, third down, second and short back. But he's just not appealing in terms of like running back elusiveness when you think of like a total running back.
But again, Riff, before you go here, again, I think he's a perfect comp to some of these shifty backs in offenses, right? Like the Eagles could use a dude like that with Jordan Howard gone. The Chiefs, obviously, we keep mentioning, some of these offenses that thrive off of the shifty, catchable running back, but they need that bowl because inevitably you're going to have a second, third, and fourth and one.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have goal line carries, and you can't necessarily rely on those smaller backs for that. So to have a guy, Bo Scarborough last year, I know it wasn't sexy, but he was able to get a couple valuable touches and carries and touchdowns for the Lions. And obviously LG, right? LeGarrette Blount made a career out of second and 3. You know what I mean? And he had a great career, multiple Super Bowls, whatever. CJ Anderson, same thing. So I think there's a place for these guys, but you're right, they're just not as sexy. Riff, anything to add?
Yeah, he's going to be used, and I keep using these Oregon references. I can use other schools too, but just because Sky is here, it's a lot easier. Remember how Oregon used, how Oregon used Kenai Benoit? That's Dillon in the NFL. Like he's going, like Lukas, you just articulated it perfectly. So I'm not going to be redundant here for every reason. But this guy, 3rd and 2 on the 4-yard line, you're going to get or 3rd and goal from the 4, you're going to get a touchdown with him. He's going to be your third down back in short yardage situations. He's going to be your goal line back in short yardage situations, which is repetitive. But yeah, other than that, I don't really see him he's not a 3-down back type of, when you're 243 pounds, like, I don't know how you can be. Yeah, I thought LeGarrette Blount was a good comp. I think actually Blount was probably more athletic just like a pure athletic standpoint. which is crazy to say. At least in college, Blunt still gained weight in the NFL. I think this guy would be great. I think you guys said the Chiefs was great, Eagles, even the Bills. I think it would be a really good offset to Singletary. So I'd like to see him up there. Other than that, yeah, I mean, every NFL team would have a use for a back like that. So he's going to be useful no matter who he goes to. I don't know how much value. I mean, like, he might be like a good flex play in a bye week situation in fantasy if you're hoping for, a touchdown or two and like 15 yards maybe. But other than that, I don't know how much value he brings from a fantasy perspective.
Cool. Let's get into one of these smaller school guys. Jonathan, I know you like these guys. Darrington Evans out of Appalachian State.
Oh, no, Appalachian.
Appalachian. Sorry, bro.
You
Appalachian
West
State.
Coaster.
Yeah, right. No shit. Appalachian State. Well, I always think of Appalachian Trail, right?
Well, it's Appalachian though. We've been saying it wrong.
Yeah, dude, it's that same thing. Right. Like everybody east of the Mississippi says Oregon. So this is my version of mispronunciation.
Fair enough.
Sorry about that. I'm sure people will riddle me on Twitter and YouTube here. Let's dive into it, man. It's again, Jonathan, I know you like these smaller school guys. You like to give reps, and then we have a couple deep sleepers after this. But let's dive in here.
Yeah, he's cool. 203, 5'10". He's pretty fast. He's not explosive. Like in the second level, he's not just going to accelerate past you as a defensive back, but he's really quick off the block, which I think is really beneficial in the NFL because as soon as that ball snaps, like your goal as a running back is to beat a defensive lineman or a linebacker to whatever spot, whatever hole, whatever gap you're trying to hit. And this guy is so quick off the block. I think that like springy is a good term to use him or for him. And I think that plays a big part in his viability in the NFL. Great vision, runs with his head up. Again, Appalachian State, fine. You can be like, oh, well, they're in a group of five. They're a dominant program. They were a top 25 program. They should have represented the group of five in a New Year's Six Bowl. They didn't end up doing it. I thought they should have. But I mean, a good example, and I know this is tough for people who don't understand not Power 5 sport or football, but like University of Louisiana Lafayette was one of the best defensive lines, probably the best defensive line in the group of five and probably like a top 30 in the nation. They just got the big boys who didn't go to LSU basically from the South. And this guy ran all over them twice, both in the rivalry game in conference and then for the conference championship. So yeah, I see no problem taking this guy in like the fourth, probably the fifth round. If you're being really safe, he could go in the fourth. But he's a subpar blocker. Other than that, he's an NFL running back.
Yeah, he has fantastic long downfield speed, fantastic like vision when he just runs the ball, and he has that production check mark or checkbox that you want to fill out when you're just evaluating running backs. And I don't want to say he did it at a high level, yes, because they played less competition, but he did it repetitively every game, and they used him. I don't have his exact like snap share, but like I watched their games just because they were fun to watch last year. He was out there basically every single snap. He was the main focal point of the offense, and I think that will translate. One of the 32 NFL teams will like him, and they will draft him in the fourth or fifth round to be a third down back or just get like, think of like Gus Edwards. Like Gus Edwards continues to get signed back, and not that he's fantasy relevant, but like he's getting 10 carries a game because he's efficient. They can trust him, and he gets 5+ yards of carries. So like he's kind of like, that's like kind of the career path I see with him. And then if the running back ahead of him gets injured, he's fantasy relevant, and he could take over the offense.
Vegas, baby. Put it behind Jacobs.
That'd be fun.
Excellent. You guys have any deeper sleepers here? We've gone through a lot of names. I know you've always going to have somebody in the bag, especially at the running back and wide receiver position. Lukas, why don't we kick off with you, and then we'll round out with Riff.
Yeah, I'll leave Eno for Jonathan there. So I
appreciate that.
3, but I won't go super in depth. So Pete Guerrero, Levante Bellamy, and James Robinson. Levante Bellamy and Guerrero just have fantastic. They have elite speed that isn't shown when you go to the Guerrero didn't go to the combine. He's a D2. He might even be less than a D2 running back, but he put up almost 2,000 yards last year. Just I don't even know if he's going to get drafted. He might not even be a UDFA, but he's just a fantastic athlete, a track runner. The 100 and 200 meter dash. If he gets the chance, special teams or something, he might have a chance. Bellamy, he didn't run very good at the combine. I think he ran a 4.5, but just watching, like when he gets a little bit of a gap, he's gone. He's out of Western Michigan. Kind of like Darrington Evans has the production, was out there a lot, maybe to a lesser extent. And then James Robinson out of Illinois State. Same scenario, just a really good running back on a smaller school. He'll need even a 7th-round pick would just be a chance to maybe make the roster. But those are like extreme deep guys. But I'll let Jonathan break down Benjamin.
Appreciate it. Well, so I'm going to start off with Michael Perrine because we haven't talked about him from Florida. He's cool. He only had 6 touchdowns this season in a conference that obviously has the best defensive lines on a team that was so overly hyped coming into the season. Same deal with that. I don't know what it is about Florida. They're like Texas. You get one great season out of them, and then for the next 10 years, everybody's like, "Oh, this school is going to be great." No, that's like, come on. Anyways, but I think Perrine had a nice season. They had some quarterback issues. Obviously, they lost their starter like 3 games in or broke his leg. And there's a whole bunch of managerial issues, coaching issues at Florida that I think affected his production in a way, just because of the scheme. But he's a good pass catcher. He's fast. I could see him he's bigger. He's 5'11", but I could see him in a Darren Sproles like role for a team, or an Austin Eckler when he's backing up Melvin Gordon like role for a team. You're going to see him go probably in the 6th round, but I think that he has an opportunity to actually be something in the NFL. So that's the Michael Perrine. And then obviously Benjamin. I think Benjamin is going to be better than some of the players that we just talked about. Not as serious. I think he's going to be better than Anthony McFarland. I think he's going to be better than Zach Moss. Everybody's saying Clyde Edwards-Helaire go to Tampa Bay. I think Benjamin should go to Tampa Bay. You talk about like dump down back. You talk about the explosiveness that you like to have next to Tom Brady. I think Benjamin brings that for you. He was Texas born and raised, and anytime you can get a successful college running back who was born and raised in Texas, probably translates to the NFL, because running backs out of Texas are always just a different breed out of high school. So I think that Benjamin, he's going to go in the 5th round, early 5th round, late 4th round. I think he could be a top 5 running back out of this draft at the very best. But I think his floor is still going to be he's going to split carries. He's either going to be the 3rd down back at the start and then split carries, depending on where he goes, or he's going to be the guy who the back end of the split off the bat, and then eventually I think he has the possibility of being a full-time 3-down back.
Great.
He Tariq Cohen. I think that's my comp for him when I was rewatching.
That's a good one.
Like, he'll be used to that extent. Yeah, I really like him a lot.
Excellent. Well done, boys. That wraps up the running backs, the incoming running backs here coming up from the draft on Thursday. The NFL draft just right around the corner here. We had quarterbacks yesterday, running backs today, of course, wide receivers coming up tomorrow, tight ends on Thursday. Before we sign off here, Lukas, can you please let everybody know what's coming down the pipeline this Sunday here? We've been repping it quite a bit on the podcast, but coming up this Sunday after the NFL draft, what do you have for everybody?
Yep. So on Sunday it's for dynasty fantasy football, but it can apply to just scouting players, just getting a better knowledge. Our draft guide, I don't even know the exact amount. We have a ton of breakdowns for pretty much every well-known quarterback, every well-known tight end, every running back, receiver you can think of, and even some of the later guys we've been talking about. A bunch of other articles on there, videos. So I don't want to give away the domain yet, so they don't go on it, because it probably won't be finished by the time they hear this, but April 26th, it'll come out.
Boom. Jonathan, it's always a pleasure to have you, man. We got you for a couple more days here, but as people are piecing through this podcast, I first of all apologize to our Appalachian listeners. Thank you for the catch on that. But also, I did not do a proper job of introducing you to the podcast here for people coming in individually on these episodes. So please give us a synopsis of what you do in general and where people can find your content as well, and we'll get out of here.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, intros, whatever. I think most people hopefully believe my credibility from the words that I say, not from the background that I have coming into the podcast.
Sure.
But
it gives some perspective.
Yeah. Also, by the way, just a note on the Appalachian thing. So one of the things I do, so I guess this kind of ties in. I work with Ryan Leaf on top. I host the Pac-12 podcast for the Bleep Podcast Network with Ryan Leaf. I actually just got in some Twitter trouble this morning because I falsely advertised that Ryan shattered a backboard in high school, when it turns out he didn't actually shatter a backboard, and now I'm in the whole thing with that. Anyways, Ryan's the man, though. But yeah, so he was calling an Appalachian State football game. He said Appalachian in the intro. He got slammed for it on Twitter by all the Appalachian fans. He didn't make that mistake the rest of the broadcast or the 3 other times he called Appalachian State games. He told me that if I ever use Appalachian State on the air to make sure I say it correctly, just want to make sure I pay it forward. Yeah, so Pac-12 podcast on the Believe Podcast Network is where we are at. Ryan and I are currently in the midst. This, I guess, is now the official announcement. It's not going to come out by the time this drops. But Ryan and I are working on a YouTube live show where it'll be an interview-based show with both sports and celebrities, I guess non-athlete celebrities. Ryan has a crazy network, so that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do games, we'll do trivia, whatever. Just a good way to pass the time. I'm also a sports broadcaster. I have my own media venture down here in Southern California called Premier High School and Collegiate Sports. I'm all over the place, but it's a fun time.
You are, man. We appreciate you. Really quick to dive back into the Appalachian.
Sure.
So as you know, and the listeners, I'm sure, have heard over the years, I was previously in a touring reggae band around the country for a decade, still play music locally and do some things, but not touring as much anymore. Anyway, there's a little town in Idaho called Moscow. Moscow, Idaho, one of my favorite venues, great town, a lot of memories there. But it's spelled exactly the same as Moscow, Russia. So the first time we played there, we gave a general shout out from stage, like, yo, Moscow, how you feeling? And in a college town, it was just like everybody went like a record skip, right? And this one dude in the back goes, it's Moscow. And we're all just like, awkward. We've played there probably 50 times since, and I try to make sure we're 100% on top of it because you hate to offend people on accident.
It's like when us Southern Californians decide to go to Oregon for college, and we call it the Willamette. Yeah,
Willamette,
look at the beautiful Willamette River flowing through Central Oregon. No, it's the freaking Willamette, man.
Well, the reality is, man, people just don't know. So I appreciate you correction. I'm all, we're about integrity here on the podcast. We want to make sure we get it right. So I never worry about a player mispronunciation or a city or certainly a school. So thank you for that. Yo, always a pleasure, man. Never a chore. You can find the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast. Please have a rate and review for us. Also tell your friends and your family as we get gearing up here for the NFL draft this week and fantasy drafts coming around the corner. A lot coming up this summer. You can find us, of course, on Instagram at fantasyfootball_TCK pod, on Twitter at TCK_pod. Our website has everything you can look for. That's under construction for the rest of the summer, and there's bits and pieces coming together, but that will be ready to go here come July and August for fantasy drafts. And make sure to subscribe here on the YouTube channel and leave a comment of who you think some of these top-tier running backs, where you think they're going to land, but also some of these deeper sleepers. Maybe we missed a name or two from your favorite school. We want to know about them. So always a pleasure. Never a chore, gentlemen. Let's do it again. Receivers coming up tomorrow. Having a lot of fun here. For Jonathan Rifkind and Lukas Kaser, I'm Sky Guasco, and we are out of here.